Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Communication Style 101, hosted by HRDQ-U and presented by Peggy Greenberg. My name is Sarah, and I will moderate today's webinar. The webinar will last about an hour. If you do have any questions, go ahead and type them into that questions area in your GoToWebinar control panel, and then we'll either answer them as they come in or after the session by email. Today's webinar content is from our best-selling assessment and workshop, What's My Communication Style? If you are interested in delivering this training within your organization, please contact HRDQ. Now, give a warm welcome to our presenter today, Peggy.
Thank you, Sarah, and I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to all of you. I am delighted to be here with you today and to talk about Communication Style 101. So I want to start out by just showing you where we're headed today, our roadmap for today's session, if you will. And so we're gonna first start out by defining communication. It's such a huge area, huge field, and so it's important to define it. And then we're going to talk about what is your communication style. So I'm going to be identifying for you 4 styles. And as Sarah said, this is taken from HRDQ's communication style assessment. So we're going to look at what are the strengths and the trouble spots of the 4 styles, because all styles have some strengths, but there are also some things that can make your communication not be as effective as it possibly could. So we're going to look at that. And then we're going to talk about how do you interact with people, individuals or team members, maybe your boss, other people in your family perhaps, who have a different communication style than your own, because we will meet people with all 4 styles, and so we have to learn how to interact with people that have a style that's different from our own. And then how can you quickly gauge the style of someone that is a new acquaintance, because you might not have the time to really, you might not have much time to spend with them, but you need to know how they're communicating so that you can be most effective. So I think since this is a session on communication, I want to start by telling you a little bit about me. And, you know, I have worked in a variety of different positions. I have been the Director of Training and Organizational Development in several healthcare organizations. Most recently, I was the Director of the Office of Education and Training for the United States Senate. I have also served in the capacity of being an executive coach and consultant, and I conduct a lot of training seminars for various organizations, as well as being an online moderator for business management and communication topics. So my work, needless to say, has involved a lot of communication with people at all levels in many different types of organizations, in fact. And to me, above all, the skills that are needed for personal, the skill that is needed for personal and professional success is the ability to communicate effectively. It is a core competency. So the time that you spend today, and in fact, any time I think that you spend sharpening your communication skills, is a true investment in your future success. So I think it's a good investment that you're here with us today, and you're eager to learn about communication style and communication skill. So the first question then is, what is communication? And as I mentioned to you, this is a very, very big topic, and it's a very big part of all that we do. There are countless definitions of communication, but the ones that I think summarize communication the best are, first of all, communication's the process of attempting to create shared understanding. And you'll notice that I say attempting to create shared understanding, because really, until we get feedback on whether our message was received the way that we intended it, it's only an attempt. You know, you really don't know until you get feedback whether or not your message was received the way that you intended it. The second thing is that communication is, as all of you know, I'm sure, it's both verbal and nonverbal. So it's not just what we say, but how we say it. And, we've all experienced this as well. Maybe this morning when you were coming into your office or, on the train or wherever, you said good morning to someone and they said good morning back to you, but you could tell by the way that they looked and by the way that they sounded that it was anything but a good morning for them. As a matter of fact, it's been noted in the research that we actually believe nonverbal communication significantly more than we believe verbal communication. So it's both verbal and nonverbal. And then finally, it's a simultaneous assigning of meaning. So as soon as you put a thought, a feeling, a word out there, some meaning is attached to it. And, right or wrong. So we have to be very mindful of what are we saying and how are we saying it, because as soon as it's out there, some meaning is attached to it by the person or persons with whom we're communicating. So now that we have some definition of communication, I want to share some key communication principles. First of all, as I mentioned, communication occurs when a sent message is received. That's when we can say we've had communication. And above all, it's not only when it was just received, but it was received in the way that we intended it. So the message very often that's received might not be the same as the one that was sent. And again, I'm sure we've all had this experience. We communicate, we say something, or we put something into an email or whatever, and we find out that the person is upset, or we find out that the person thinks that we're angry with them or whatever. So, communication, the message very often it might not be received with the same, the message might not be received the way that we in fact intended it. And the reason for that is that sender and receiver each have a history and a personal communication style. And both of these can affect the interpretation of any message. So, this is why I think it's important to learn about communication and about communication style. Another reason communication is complicated is because it can and does take so many forms other than the spoken word. And each of the forms of communication or the types of communication actually add like a level of complexity to what we're doing. So there are 4 types of communication. First of all, we have verbal communication. And, we as individuals have complete control over the words we use, but the meaning of those words might not be shared, again, by the person that we're speaking to. Differences in things like our age, our experience, our background, semantics can really does have a tremendous effect on how a message is received. And I know, being someone who is in an older generation, sometimes I have to really try to figure out what some people of the younger generations are actually talking about. I know that they're speaking the same language, but because of their age, their verbal communication has words in it or phrases in it that I'm just not as familiar with. Secondly, a second type of communication is paraverbal communication. And this includes things like the pace of our speech, the tone of our voice, the intensity, whether or not there's any irony or sarcasm that's in there. And, some people are very, very good about being able to imply. And again, if you just looked at what the words were, the words were fine, but again, the sarcastic tone that they were expressed with certainly gets that message across. And paraverbal cues also kind of help us interpret the meaning of what someone is saying. And without these cues, unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to interpret speech forms such as irony or sarcasm or intensity. So again, like verbal communication, a mismatch of style can make interpretation more difficult, and it can also make understanding communication styles more difficult as well. The third form of communication is body language, the way we stand, how we shake hands or if we shake hands, whether or not we make eye contact. All of these are forms of body language that communicate meaning to other people. And so our body language can say to somebody else, I'm listening to you. I'm very attentive to you. It can communicate our emotion if we're sad or mad or whatever. And it certainly can communicate our reaction to what someone else, to the words of another person. Facial expressions, another form of body language. I'm sure we've all heard the phrase, it was written all over your face. So again, it's not what you said, but it's how you looked when you said it, or it's how you looked when I gave you that message. So body language is a very important way that we communicate, an important type of communication. And lastly, personal space, which includes not only the space between you and others, but also your appearance, how you choose to decorate your personal space, your office or your cubicle or whatever. The interpersonal distance that we keep when we're communicating with someone else, whether or not we get close to them or stand far away. So our personal space is also something that gives out messages. And again, we have to make sure that they're the ones that are intended. So there are some key principles that guide effective communication. And the first one is that it is unavoidable. You can't not communicate. I don't know if any of you have ever taken a communication course in high school or college, but you might have actually seen that quote or that phrase in the beginning of the book. You have to communicate. It's unavoidable. Secondly, it contains content, what the person is actually communicating, but then there's also information about the content. So that information are the things that we get from the nonverbal. So it's not only the words we say, but there's some other messages. There's another message that gets given out just by tone of voice and again, body language and the paraverbal things that I just talked about. An interesting principle about communication is that it produces conflict, but it's also the only way that we have for resolving conflict. And often miscommunication causes conflict, or communication causes conflict. So what do we do sometimes? Well, we just say, I'm just going to stop communicating with that person. I've had it. I'm not going to communicate with them anymore. So we stop communicating, and then the conflict just festers and grows and never gets resolved. So miscommunication produces conflict, but it's also the only method that we know for resolving conflict. Next, communication is circular and complex. It is not linear. It is not I send a message, you receive. I send a message, you receive. We have to think about the whole context in which we are communicating. What's going on? Where is the communication taking place? What's the method that we used? Is it verbal? Is it electronic? What is it? So communication is circular and complex, and it's not linear. And if we communicate in a way that says, I send the message, you receive them, and I don't have any other responsibility, we'll probably find ourselves in situations of miscommunication. It happens within an individual's frame of reference, and we all have a frame of reference. Our frame of reference was developed by how we were raised, where we grew up, what part of the country or the world we were part of. So we all have an individual frame of reference, and all communication goes through that individual frame of reference. It's almost like a filter, but our frame of references are all different. And then finally, semantics matter. Words matter. Words mean different things to different people. I moved to Boston many years ago from Louisiana, and I honestly thought I had moved to a foreign country because the semantics here were different than in the South. So you might be asking yourself, why bother? This sounds hard. Already this sounds difficult to me. And why bother is because communication or miscommunication is the number one reason why relationships fail, and again, maybe some of us bear some personal scars as a result of a relationship failing because of miscommunication. It's why job performance is not what it needs to be, because communication between employee and employer is not what it needs to be, and as a result of that, the individual's performance suffers. It's a number one reason why sales are lost, and it's a number one reason why customer service in so many organizations fails to satisfy customers because of miscommunication. And so, why bother is also, as Peter Drucker, the great management guru, once said, as soon as you move one step up from the bottom, your effectiveness depends on your ability to reach others through the spoken and written word. So again, our success really depends on our effectiveness in communication. And Paul Meyer once said that communication, the human connection, is the key to personal and career success. And again, I think that is absolutely, absolutely true. But sometimes it takes courage to communicate. Communication, again, is the basis for all of our relationships, work, personal, all of our relationships. And that means that sometimes we have to summon the courage to get a message across, or find the courage to listen to what someone else is trying to communicate to us, what we're hearing from other people. So sometimes it definitely does take courage to communicate. So we've explored some definitions of communication and some important key principles, and each of us have a way of communicating, which is in fact our communication style. So what is communication style? Well, first of all, it's how we act when we can do things our own way. It's what's most natural and comfortable to us. And in fact, our communication style is behavior that's so consistent that it's actually predictable. So as I describe for you 4 communication styles, I want you to think about the people that are important to you, the people that are in your world, in your personal life, in your work life. And chances are, based on my descriptions, you will be able to predict what their style is as well, because again, our communication style is behavior that's so consistent that it's predictable. And it's behavior also that seems typical of our personality, or we begin to expect it most of the time. For example, if someone is friendly, most of the, they're just very friendly. That person becomes known as that friendly person. And so the second that person isn't friendly for whatever reason, everybody wonders what's going on with them. And that's because that behavior became so typical, it became such a part of their personality that everyone has come to expect it most of the time. So there's some benefits to all of us about understanding our communication style and the communication style of other people. First of all, it improves our interaction and our relationships with others. It absolutely, if we're able to understand communication style, it helps us to understand the behavior of other people. It also helps others to interpret your behavior, and it helps you to interpret the behavior of other people. So, again, it's an important thing to have a handle on. And I think at the end of the day, it influences our success. If we're aware that working with people means that we all have a different style, or potentially we all have a different style, then we know that if we need to work with that person, maybe we need to get something done with them, maybe we're on a project or an assignment with them, maybe we manage them, if we know that their style is different, we can flex our style in order to be most successful. So our understanding your communication style very definitely influences your success. So that leads us to the next question. What's your communication style? And I'm going to be describing some styles to you. And again, this is based on the HRDQ style model. And there are two dimensions to our communication style. First of all, is expressiveness. And expressiveness is the effort that a person makes to control his or her emotions when relating to other people. So, for example, people who are expressive display their emotions, and they tend to be very versatile, very sociable, very demonstrative. And people who are less expressive control their emotions, and they tend to be a little bit more private or a little bit more focused, a little bit more independent. So one dimension of our communication style is our degree of expressiveness. The second dimension of our style is the degree of our assertiveness. And assertiveness is the effort that a person makes to influence or control the thoughts or the actions of other people. And so people who are assertive tell other people how things should be and tend to be very task-oriented, very active, come across as being very confident. And people who are less assertive ask others how things should be and tend to be more process-oriented, more deliberate, and seemingly more attentive. So we have two dimensions to our style. And out of that grows the four different styles. And again, this is the HRDQ communication style model. And if you look around the edges, you see two measures: expressiveness and assertiveness. And the two styles in the left-hand side of the diagram, direct and systematic, are lower in expressiveness, and the two styles on the right-hand side of the diagram, spirited and considerate, are higher in expressiveness. The lower half of the diagram represents the two styles that are lower in assertiveness, systematic and considerate. And the upper part of the diagram, direct and spirited, represents styles that are higher in assertiveness. So I'm going to describe these a little bit more to you, but you kind of understand the two dimensions, assertiveness and expressiveness. And I'm going to describe the four styles to you. And I want you to think about the one that sounds the most like you. So first of all, we have our direct communicators. And again, direct communicators tend to have very direct speech. These are individuals who like to take charge. They prefer to be in control, so they might have a very loud tone. Their body language tends to be very much like their style, a very firm handshake, so that you know that they're there with you. They very often will speak very forcefully along with that firm handshake that they give you. And they present, their strength is that they present their position strongly. And this is a style, a communication style of people very often that are in leadership positions, not all, but very often direct people, because they are kind of take charge people, tend to be in leadership positions, and they possess very strong leadership skills. And honestly, they're not afraid to take risks and to get what they need. And then we have spirited communicators. And spirited communicators are very persuasive people, tend to be very enthusiastic and very friendly. So they have a lot of vocal inflection. You can tell when a spirited person is in the room. You can usually hear them, actually. Their body language is enthusiastic. They have an enthusiastic facial expression, an enthusiastic handshake, and they tend to be people who are very good at telling stories. That's a strength for them. But if you look at sort of where they operate from, like their personal workspace, for example, you might wonder how they get anything done, because it's very difficult to see through the clutter, perhaps, that might be in their personal workspace. And then we have our considerate communicators, and these are the verbal signs of a considerate communication. Is they have very supportive language. Their tone is softer, certainly softer than spirited or direct communicators, and they have a gentle handshake, which goes along with sort of the warmth that they demonstrate. Considerate communicators are the best listeners, absolutely the best listeners of the 4 styles, and they're great listeners because they take the time to build trust. So you'll notice, for example, in their personal space, a lot of sentimental items. So a lot of photographs of children or grandchildren or animals or whatever. You'll notice you would know something about them just by being in their personal space for a short period of time. And again, because they do take the time to build trust, and they're always aware of other people's feelings. They're very good communicators, and they're very good listeners, and therefore very good communicators as well. And then finally, we have our systematic communicators. And systematic communicators have very precise language because they tend to be very organized, very orderly, and so their language is very precise. They don't put lots of extra words in their language. They tell you what you need to know, and they tell that in as few words as possible. People who are systematic communicators very often will stand back a little bit. That touching is not something that someone who is a systematic communicator is very interested in doing. So this isn't the person that you want to necessarily give a big hug to, for example. And their delivery of their speech, again, is not very elaborate. It's very even, and that's how you know that's a cue that you might be communicating with someone whose style is systematic. Now, their strength is that these are the information seekers, and these are the problem solvers. They make their decisions based on fact, and they're very objective and very accurate in fact as well. So systematic communicators are the ones that we want to make sure that we don't eliminate or not listen to because they might be a little bit quieter. So my question to you is, what do you think your predominant communication style is? Are you direct, spirited, considerate, or systematic? I'm going to give you a minute.
Great, so we have the poll open there. You can go ahead and click on any of those radio buttons and then just make sure you hit submit so that comes through. And we definitely have people participating here, so I'll give it another couple of seconds, make sure we capture everybody.
Great.
Okay. Okay, so here's our results. We have 21% said direct, 19% spirited, 23% said considerate, and 37% said systematic.
Wow. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. So it looks like the greater majority of you fall into the considerate and systematic communication style. And again, I don't know why that is. I'm not sure, if that has to do with the kind of, again, where you came from or the kind of work that you do or whatever. But this is a pretty good spread. We have people representing all the 4 styles, which is certainly something that we're always looking for. So keep your predominant style in mind, because I want to talk now about some of the trouble spots of each of those 4 styles, because each style has sort of its flip side, of the traits that I just shared with you a few minutes ago. And these are like our blind spots, and what happens is that they occur when we carry our strengths to extreme. Okay, so we're really good at being a take charge kind of person, but maybe that's not what's called for. Maybe that's not what everyone else wants. So it's good to be aware of your blind spots, because that can help you to balance your strengths and to be aware of the fact that, okay, I don't want to overdo that, because that might not be what's appropriate for the situation or what's appropriate for the people that I'm communicating with. So as I reviewed the trouble spots, I want you to ask yourself, based on what your style is that you just self-identified, I want you to think about, what can I do to limit these behaviors? So for example, a direct person, that communicator that likes to kind of take charge and move ahead, could be, as I mentioned before, a poor listener. Very often, of the 4 styles, the direct style is the poorest listener of all, and that's because of the fact that people with a direct style tend to be impatient, and they don't really care about feelings. They just want to get it done. And so again, very often that poor listening leads to perhaps not listening to the advice of someone else, or not really listening to all the details, because I just want to get it done. So again, a trouble spot for direct people is poor listening. A trouble spot for people who are spirited, and again, we love the spiritedness of spirited people, but a trouble spot can be that spirited people might tend to exaggerate, and they gloss over the details. Perhaps they tend to generalize, and as a result of that, the drama of spirited people sometimes can be a turnoff to other people, for example, and it can also mean that they're not really listening to details, because they're so excited, or they're so they have such a need to be in the front of the pack, that they might not, again, listen to details. The considerate communication style, very often a big trouble spot for the considerate style, is that the considerate style, in their quest to avoid conflict, will sometimes tell other people what they want to hear, and they might not be totally authentic with other people, because they don't want conflict, or they don't want that person to be upset with them or angry with them or whatever. So, they considerate folks prefer what's comfortable, and so again, will often tell other people what they want to hear. And as we all know, sometimes that's not the best thing. We've got to tell people what they need to hear, as opposed to what they want to hear. So again, considerate a trouble spot for the considerate style is that unwillingness, or that lack of willingness perhaps, to be totally authentic with other people in an effort to avoid conflict. A trouble spot for the systematic style is that systematics focus too much on details. And again, they put accuracy ahead of feelings. And as a result of that, that can be a real turnoff to other people. And, in their quest, again, to get it right, they might not notice that, they're getting it right, but nobody's with them. Nobody else understands, or nobody else is on the same page as they are. So again, the focus on detail very often can lead the systematic communication style to ignore others, and to ignore other people, as they focus on data and only data in their quest to get the work done. So again, all of the styles have some trouble spots, and we just need to be aware of those, and to know what our style is, and potentially what some trouble spots might be for us, considering our individual communication style. So what about the communication style of other people? And, the reality is that it's very likely that your boss, or your close work colleagues, and maybe even members of your family, will often be a different style than your own. So the next question is how do we get along with these different styles? How do we make it work? Well, the strongest difference in style will be if you have a style that is diametrically opposed to that other person, or those other people in your important environment, your work environment, your home environment. So for instance, there's nothing that will drive a direct communication style more crazy than a considerate communication style that wants to ask everybody's opinion, and let's find out, let's do a poll, or let's put it out for everybody to chime in on. And the direct communication style just wants to get it done. So that diametric opposition will be difficult for the direct person. And a considerate communication style person might be overwhelmed by, the pace and the forcefulness of someone who is direct, as they lay out directives, or they tell everybody what to do. Likewise, there's the diametrically opposed styles of spirited and systematic. And there's hardly anything that's going to drive a systematic more crazy than, again, having a spirited person who, wants to brainstorm kind of vague ideas or generalities without, getting down to the details, or not having that backed up by some sort of research or some data or something that we definitely know. And conversely, spirited people might feel very constricted by a considerate person, a systematic style, who consistently just wants to, let's get it done, and let's limit the creativity, we don't want creative ideas, we want facts, we want research, we want data points. We don't want creative ideas. So who in your world might be, what's the style of someone that's important to you in your world? Maybe your direct supervisor, or your boss, or maybe it's a colleague who you work with closely, or maybe a spouse or a partner on the home front. So we're going to do another poll, and my question to you is, what is the style of that other person? Is it the same as yours? Is it different, but it's next to yours, so it's not diametrically opposed? Or do you have a style that's diametrically opposed to that other important person in your world? So I'm going to be quiet and let you all think about that for a second and answer that poll.
Good. It looks like we have, we're still getting some answers. So click on the radio buttons and then make sure you click submit. Okay, I think we've got everybody.
Great.
Okay, so here are our results. Same as yours, 18%. Different style, but next to yours is 48%.
Okay.
And diametrically opposite is 34%.
Ooh, okay. Well, thank you all for that. And that is certainly food for thought. The ones of you who have the same style as the important person in your world, whatever you chose, those who have the same style, you're the lucky ones. Okay. However, being the same style isn't always a guarantee of complete success in communication, because sometimes when we have the same style, we're missing out on other points of view, or we're missing out on looking for a different idea or a different suggestion or a different path to take. So you're lucky because you probably approach things in the same way. But again, think about the fact that you need different points of view very often, and so maybe you need to play another style if you happen to have the same style. Those with a different style, but not an opposite style, you need to be able to adapt or adjust to that different style. As you work with that person, as you live with that person, you need to be cognizant of what is that communication style about, and how can I adjust in order to be most successful. And those with a diametrically opposed style, so 34%, with 34% of you really have your work cut out for you. And I'm probably not telling you something you don't already know, because if there's someone who's important in your world and you have a diametrically opposed communication style, you probably already sense that. Maybe you haven't put words to it or you haven't put style names to it, but you know that we approach it in different ways, or we go about this in different ways. So you really have to, you really have to think about that. And you really have to consider what's that person's style, and what do I need to do in order to be most successful with them. I'm often asked about communication style in teams. And one of the things that we know, the truth is that there's no right or wrong style. We need all those 4 styles that I've been talking to you about today. And what I have found, and I have used the HRDQ style assessment, communication style assessment, in many organizations and with many different levels in different organizations. And what we know is that the best teams are the ones that have similar representation from all 4 styles. So again, think about a team of all direct people. It would be very chaotic. For example, a team of all direct people. A team of all spirited people might be sound like it could be fun, but again, is that what you really want? A team of all considerate people, or a team of all systematic people. So success happens when we learn how to flex our style. So I want you to engage in your imagination here just for a moment. And I want you to imagine that I am standing in a room, let's say like it's an auditorium room or conference room, for example, and I'm at a point on one wall, and we're going to call that point A. And I need to get to the other wall, which is called B, all right? So how the 4 styles get to B, if I am direct and I'm at A and I need to get to B, I am just going to go. All right. I'm not going to ask any questions. I'm not going to talk to anybody about it. I'm direct. I'm an A. I need to get to B. I'm just going to go. If I'm spirited and I'm at A and I need to get to B, I'm going to make sure that everybody else in that conference room knows that, I'm going to B. Okay. So I'm going to make sure that I've made that very well known. I've talked to everybody and let them know what I'm doing and where I'm going. If I'm systematic and I'm at A and I need to get to B, I'm probably going to check for directions, or I'm going to ask questions about why do we need to get to B? What's happening at B? What's the goal that we're trying to achieve? Or I might take a few steps and then go back and make sure that I have it right if I'm systematic. And then finally, if I'm considerate and I need to get to B and I'm at A, I'm going to ask other people too. Hey, I'm going to B. Do you want to go with me? Or, hey, do you need help getting to B? So the moral of the story is everybody gets to B, but we go about it in slightly different ways. And so again, as you think about and maybe be are challenged by dealing with people and working with people with different communication styles, I hope you'll remember that, again, we all get to be. And one of the things that we have to do in order to all get to be is to style flex. And so again, this is like, it's about adapting your communication style in order to be most effective with the person that you're trying to communicate with. So just like, you need to work on your trouble spots, it does take effort to flex to another style. But, the payoff is that it really can, I think it makes a huge difference when it comes to productive communication or unproductive communication, and or productive relationships and unproductive relationships. But practice makes perfect, and so you really do have to practice it. So how do you flex to other styles? Well, if you know that the person you're trying to communicate with is direct, you need to think about that strength and that wanting to get right away to B. So you need to ask questions directly. You need to speak quickly. You need to be very well organized, because the direct person is not going to have very much patience with you if you're not direct. If you need to flex to that spirited communication style, be very upbeat. Talk about things as though it's an exciting new concept, or, let's brainstorm a little bit. Share ideas frequently, and whatever you do, don't hurry the conversation, because the spirited person's going to want to throw out some different possibilities. If you need to flex to a considerate style, keep that relaxed pace that the considerate style person has. Support their feelings. Slow down your speech so that they're certain that they're hearing everything that you're trying to say. And then obviously, if you're communicating with a systematic style, you want to give them that data. You want to give them the rationale. You want to be very thorough, very organized, and make sure that you're focusing on facts, because again, that's what's going to make the biggest difference to the systematic style. So flexing to other people's styles, that's what we need to think about. We need to try to do a quick assessment of what their style is if it's not someone that we know, and then we need to flex to that style. So how can you speed read the style of someone else, and maybe it's somebody that you're just meeting for the first time, or that you don't know very well, or you're just working with them for the first time. Well, listen to them, look at them. So, the direct person is the person who gets to the point. They don't have a lot of, their distance is further away. They suggest power, and they're very bold. You might assume, probably rightfully so, that person has a direct communication style. The spirited person, you'll hear their enthusiasm. This is the person who's telling good stories, who might want a physical distance that's closer to you, perhaps. They tend to be very, very quick. Look at their workspace. What does that look like? Does it look like they can't find anything, or their workspace is as energetic as they are? That might be the spirited person. The considerate person, how do you speed read that? Well, again, this is a person who maybe has a softer tone. They might not be speaking up very much. You can look at them and tell that they're listening very carefully. They tend to have a slower body movement. And again, if you're in their personal space, what does it look like? Is it very clinical looking, or does it look more inviting because of personal items that are there, and photographs and that kind of thing? And then finally, you can speed read systematics because you'll hear the precision in their voice, and you'll hear them kind of talking in facts more than feelings. A very controlled movement, and again, a workspace that is in fact extremely organized and tidy, so that they can find anything in a moment. So you can actually speed read other people's styles fairly quickly. So a couple of reminders as we close down our session here. First of all, your dominant style is the one that feels the most natural to you when you're enjoying your work and your life, and you're at your most natural and comfortable. There is no right style. We need all four. And again, the best teams are the ones that have representation from all four of the communication styles. And it's very, very helpful to think about your style, and to think about what are my trouble spots. What are the things that can potentially make me a less effective communicator, and how can I practice improving on those trouble spots? And remember that you can flex to accommodate other people's styles, so that you have more successful interchanges with them. And this doesn't mean that you're abdicating your style, or you're being less than yourself. It means that you're being smart, and that that if I'm going to communicate effectively with you, I've got to see what works for you. And then I've got to flex my style in order to be most effective with you. And finally, we all get to be. It's just a matter of how we get there. So keep that in mind as well. So I want to thank you all for your participation today, and for being here. I hope that this has shed a little light on communication style for you. And I'm going to turn this back over to Sarah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Peggy. That was great. We definitely appreciate you looking to HRDQ for your training needs. So just for those who are new on the line today, I'd like to introduce HRDQ so you get familiar with us. We publish research-based experiential learning products that you can then deliver in your organization. So you can check out our online or print assessments like the What's My Communication Style, the foundation of today's webinar. We also have up out of your seat games and reproducible workshops that you can customize. So check out our website or give a call to our customer service team. And if you do need help either learning a training program or you want one of our experts like Peggy to deliver it for you, we also provide those services as well. Well, that is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much, Peggy.
You're welcome. Thanks. Great to be with you.
And thanks everyone for participating today. We'll see you at our next webinar.